All right, continuing on with section R.4, we're talking about factoring. So now we're to the ones that are kind of like puzzles. They're the trinomials that you have to work backwards and try to find the two things that multiply to give you this. They were foiled together, and this is the result. So there's many different methods that you can use to do this. I think guessing and checking is the quickest method. I still stand by that, but I have a lot of students that just hate that method, so they'd rather have a more methodical way to do it, even if it's longer, but it gets you there. So I'll talk to you about that, and also there's lots of YouTube videos on all these topics, so you might want to YouTube and see other people's perspectives on this and ways to factor a polynomial. So, okay, I'm going to try to go through, though, my favorite methods. So, like I said, my favorite method is just trial and error. I don't mind the puzzle nature of it, that I'm trying to guess and check what works. So I'm trying to foil this. And my focus, I want this to foil, F-O-I-L, to multiply to give me this. So don't even think about this 11y, because you can't foreknow. A lot of times you might have an idea, but you can't always foreknow what's going to be this middle term. You're not focusing on it at all. You're focusing on the first term, that the first times first needs to be this. So the first times first needs to be 4y squared. And then you're focusing on the last. The last times last needs to be 6. And then you just hope that when you FOIL your outer, outer, and inner, inner, that those work out to give you the right middle term. But again, with guess and check, you kind of just guess. So you don't know about the 11. You're just saying what multiplies to be 4? Well, 2 times 2. It could have been 4 times 1, but I'm guessing 2 times 2. Then to get the positive 6 on the end, the signs will need to be alike to get a positive when I multiply. I do notice a negative in the middle, so I do kind of pick up on that part of it, that I need a negative times a negative to get a positive result on the end, but still give me a negative somewhere else. So to get 6, I could use 6 times 1, or 3 times 2, or 2 times 3, I just don't know. So I check, see if that works. So let's FOIL it. First, that should be right, because I picked that to be that, so I shouldn't even have to write that down. And the L, the last times last, that should be right, because I chose it to be that. I'm really just needing to check my inner, inner, and outer, outer. So your inner times inner is negative 6y, and your outer times outer is negative 4y, and those need to combine to be negative 11y, which they do not, so I missed it. So I go back to the drawing board and say, well, maybe it was 6 times 1. Okay, let's try that. So my first, that should still be right. And my last times last is still positive 6. So I'm checking my inner, inner, and my outer, outer. And I missed it again. That adds to be negative 14y. Again, not the right result. So you just go through these different, use your pencil and try different things. What I'm going to try this time is, and I kind of think this works, 4 times 1. Haven't tried that yet. And then I could always go back to the 6 and 1 with the 4 and 1 now. So let's see, I think this will work on me though. First times first, there, that works still. And the last times last, again, those should be, you chose them to be. So you're checking your inner, inner, and your outer, outer, and there it is. It's negative 11y, so I say that FOILs to give me the right result. All right, let's try that again. Okay, example B. And sometimes if you're doing guess and check, you get it on the very first try, and sometimes you try every possible combination before you get there. So that's just sort of how that is. Like I said, if you just be patient, don't get too upset about it, just work it like you're trying to work a puzzle, then it's all good. So I'm trying to get the first term to be 6p squared, so I'm going to try 3 times 2. And I need the p times p to be p squared. I see that the last term is negative, so my signs have to be different, multiply. And I don't know whether to put plus, minus, or minus, plus, and that can make a difference. So I'm going to guess 5 times 1. Again, 5 is a prime number, so don't have a lot of choices here. It could be the reverse of that. But let's see if that works. So the first, again, we're FOILing. First should be that. That's good. And the last times last should be good. You're just checking is your inner, inner, and your outer, outer combining correctly. and I've almost got it. I got a positive 7p. I see I need a negative 7. So I can fix that easily by switching these signs around. So this one needed to be the minus and that one needed to be the plus. Now check it and you'll have the negative 7 in the middle. All right, another example. C part. Now if it wasn't for this leading coefficient other than 1, if you don't have a different coefficient here, it's easier. You can just, and you might have thought this, said, why can't she just say it multiplies to be that and adds to be that? You can only do that when you have a coefficient of 1. This lead coefficient here on the square term, it's what's making it more of a puzzle. So we'll look at one like that in a minute. If you don't have the lead coefficient there, it is much easier. But with the lead coefficient, it is really hard to foreknow what these need to be. You just kind of have to try some things and see what works. So 2x squared, 2x times 1x, and then 18. Now, there's lots of ways to get 18. 9 and 2, 6 and 3, 18 and 1. So I'm just going to throw some numbers out there. I'm going to do 6 and 3. And I'm trying not to just answer it right on the first, just throw numbers out there. So I'm not gaming it at all. I'm just guessing. Inner, inner, outer, outer. No, that's not it. That's 0x. So that's not 13. So maybe I'll try switching something around. Maybe the 3 here and the 6 there. So that's 3x, negative 12x. That's not 13 either. So it looks like 6 and 3 aren't working for me. Maybe I need a 9 and a 2. I'm going to try 9 and 2. 9x minus 4x. Nope, not 13 again. I'm going to try switching my 9 and my 2. 2x, negative 18x. Now I'm starting to say what I said. Now I'm starting to get nervous. So I'm like, this is not factoring. Sometimes they don't factor. So I'm looking to see. This was one of those. Like, nothing's working here. I haven't tried everything. I haven't tried 18 and 1 yet. So that is another thought. But as it turns out, you try every single combination of numbers that work here. This is actually prime. It will not factor. So it could be factored. That could happen to you. That's kind of a mean trick to play on you though, right? But it is possible. Not everything is factorable. Okay, so let's do another one that works. Let's look at example D. So on example D, we go back to the basics where we had to factor out the GCF first. Like I told you, always factor out the GCF if there is one. So looking through these 3 terms, 16, 24, and 16, you can factor out an 8 actually. 8 goes into all of those, and there's a y in all the terms, so you can factor out the y. Oh, I think that's supposed to be y to the 3rd. Sorry about that. So we can factor out a y to the 1st. The GCF is always what's in common and where it's at the least. So the least one is the common one. So y to the 1st factors out. So 8y times 2y squared, 8y times 3y, and 8y times negative 2. That would distribute back to give me this. Well, on this example, it factors further. This is not prime, so this one is going to be able to be unfoiled, but the 8y sort of hangs out in the front. And then we try to break this down into its reverse of the foil. So I'm going to guess 2y times 1y. And I know the signs are different to get a negative on the end. I'm going to do 1 times 2 and see if that works. That gives me a 1y minus 4y, negative 3y. So I'm close. Remember, we just have to change the sign. If we got that wrong, switch your signs around. Make this minus that plus, and then you can recheck it. It should work. So notice this one, whenever it's fully factored, it has 3 parts, but they should all be prime parts that won't go any further, and that is. All right, so let me mention to you some methods for doing this. If you just hated that trial and error puzzle thing, what else could we do? So let's look back at our first example and let's talk about that. So if you wanted to, and I think these kind of take longer, but they are methodical and they get you there. There is what I call the rainbow method, or some people call it master product method. Master product method. And any reiteration of these comes from this idea. So there's a tic-tac-toe method, and there's slip, slide, and divide, and there's all kinds of neat little tricks that you might find on YouTube or you've had in your previous classes. But they all are some sort of trick played on this master product, because here's how the numbers have to work. The first term times the last term has to be multiplied. That's the master product, or if I made it sort of like a rainbow for the rainbow method, the first times the last multiplied together. And then you have to think of combinations that multiply to be the A times the C term, the first times the last, and combines to be the middle term. So you think through all of the combinations that multiply to be 24. Again, multiply to the A times C, the front and the back terms. This is the A, B, C terms. So the A times C term and adds to middle term, or the B term. So you can just kind of write down in order, methodically, like I said, what multiplies to be 24. 1 times 24. Oh, that does not add to be 11. 2 times 12. That doesn't add to be 11. 3 times 8. That one adds to be 11. And you could keep going with your list, but now I should stop because I found one that works. And it needs to be a negative 11, so I need a negative 3 times a negative 8. Negative 3 times negative 8 will multiply to be the 24, and will add to be the negative 11. So, now that's not just what goes straight out into the parentheses. We have an intermediate step. So what we do is we rewrite this. Instead of negative 11y, we change it to our new numbers, negative 3y and negative 8y. Totally equivalent. And then plus 6. So we rewrite it with these new numbers we just found that works to give us that exact same thing. And then you factor it by grouping. So factoring by grouping, if you remember from an earlier lecture, you take the first two, the last two, or some combination, you group them, and then you factor out the GCF of just the first two, and then the GCF of the second two, so we can factor out a negative 2. And if you did it correctly, you should have a matching set here. And then you factor that matching set out, and then write what's left, y minus 2. And that's a methodical, always get you there way to do it. And you should always FOIL to check. The first is the 4y squared. The last is the positive 6. Your inner minus 3y, and outer minus 8y is negative 11y. So that will always get you there without the guessing and the checking.